The morning sun filtered through the worn curtains of the small apartment in Brooklyn, casting gentle rays across Emma's bedroom. Once upon a time, this hour would have been filled with the sweet, off-key melody of Twinkle, Twinkle Little Star, or The Bitsy Spider. Emma had been the kind of child who greeted every sunrise with a song, her tiny voice carrying through the hallways, waking her mother with pure joy rather than an alarm clock. But that was 6 months ago. Now silence reigned. Sarah stood in the doorway of her daughter's room, coffee mug trembling in her hand, watching Emma sit motionless on her bed. The 3-year-old clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hoppy, staring blankly at the wall. No songs, no giggles, no demands for pancakes or cartoons, just crushing, unbearable silence. "Good morning, baby," Sarah whispered, forcing brightness into her voice that she didn't feel. Emma's eyes flickered toward her mother for the briefest moment before returning to that distant, unreachable place where she now lived. Sarah's heart cracked a little more, just as it did every single morning. It had happened on a Thursday. Sarah would never forget that day, October 14th, the day her daughter's voice disappeared. She'd arrived at Sunshine at 5:47 p.m., running late from work as usual, expecting to find Emma playing with blocks or pestering the teachers with endless questions. Instead, she found her daughter in the corner of the quiet room, small body curled into a ball, rocking back and forth. Silent tears streamed down her flushed cheeks. "Emma, baby, what's wrong?" Sarah had dropped to her knees, reaching for her daughter. Emma actually flinched from her mother's touch. That alone had sent ice through Sarah's veins. Her daughter had never been afraid of her. Mrs. the director had appeared with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, she's just tired. Had a bit of a rough day. You know how toddlers can be emotional." The explanation felt hollow, rehearsed, but Sarah had been too focused on Emma to question it then. That night, Emma didn't speak at dinner. She didn't ask for her bedtime story. She didn't sing in the bathtub. Sarah had assumed she was sick, maybe coming down with something. "Use your words, sweetie. Does your tummy hurt? Does your throat hurt?" But Emma just stared with those haunted eyes that suddenly seemed too old for her baby face. One day of silence became 2, then a week, then a month. The pediatrician found nothing physically wrong. "Sometimes children go through phases," doctor had said, but even she looked concerned. "Let's give it a little time." Time passed, but Emma's voice didn't return. The referral to a child psychologist came next. Dr. Lisa, a specialist in childhood trauma, spent 8 sessions with Emma. The little girl played with toys, drew pictures, but never spoke. Not a single word. "She's experienced something traumatic," doctor had finally told Sarah during a private consultation. "Something significant enough to trigger selective mutism. Has anything changed at home? At any incidents you're aware of?" Sarah had racked her brain, replaying every moment. Nothing at home had changed. But she'd started hearing whispers from other parents. Children coming home with unexplained bruises. Kids who suddenly refused to go to school. Parents who mentioned their children seemed afraid of Mrs. Sarah had withdrawn Emma immediately, but the damage was already done. The nightmare started around month 3. Emma would wake up screaming, or rather her mouth would open in a silent scream, no sound emerging. She'd thrash in her bed, fighting invisible demons until Sarah held her tight and rocked her back to sleep. "Mommy's here. You're safe. You're safe." But Emma never seemed convinced. Sarah quit her job at the dental office to stay home with Emma full-time. Money got tight. Bills piled up. But nothing mattered except helping her daughter find her way back from wherever she'd gone. They tried art therapy. Emma drew the same picture over and over, dark scribbles, heavy black marks that tore through the paper. They tried play therapy. Emma lined up her toys in rigid rows but never made them interact. They tried music therapy. Emma listened, but never sang along to songs she once knew by heart. Every specialist said the same thing. "She needs time, be patient, don't push her." But how much time? How patient could a mother be when watching her child fade away? The other children at Sunshine had started talking to their parents, to social workers, to the police. Stories emerged of neglect, of children locked in dark rooms for hours, of meals as punishment, of emotional abuse that left no visible scars but deep psychological wounds. An investigation was launched. Criminal charges were filed. And then came the letter from the district attorney's office. Emma was the longest enrolled child at Sunshine. She'd been there since she was 18 months old. She'd witnessed everything. The investigators were certain of it. Her testimony could make or break the case against Mrs. But how could a child who hadn't spoken in 6 months testify? Sarah looked at her daughter now, still sitting motionless on the bed, Mr. Hoppy clutched to her chest. The court date was in 1 week, 7 days to perform a miracle, 7 days to give Emma back her voice. "We have pancakes today," Sarah said softly, sitting beside her daughter. "Your favorite with chocolate chips." Emma's eyes didn't change. She didn't smile. She didn't reach for her mother's hand. But somewhere deep inside that silence, Sarah had to believe her little girl was still there, waiting for someone or something to help her find her way back to the light. She just had no idea that salvation would come in the form of a golden-furred, four-legged miracle named Finn. The envelope had arrived 3 days ago, but Sarah still couldn't bring herself to open it fully. It sat on her kitchen table like a ticking bomb, the official seal of the New York District Attorney's office mocking her every time she walked past. She'd read the first paragraph: "We are writing to inform you that your daughter, Emma, has been identified as a material witness." Before her hands started shaking so badly, she had to put it down. Now at 2:37 a.m., unable to sleep, Sarah sat in the dim glow of her kitchen light, forcing herself to read the rest. The words blurred together through her exhausted tears. Critical testimony, strongest case, justice for all victims, subpoena if necessary. That last phrase made her stomach turn. They would force her 3-year-old daughter into a courtroom if she refused to cooperate. They would drag a traumatized, nonverbal child in front of strangers, lawyers, and the woman who had terrorized her. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from her sister, Maria. "Can't sleep either, thinking about you guys. Whatever you decide, I'm here." Whatever you decide. As if this were a simple choice. As if there were a right answer hidden somewhere that Sarah just needed to find. She opened her laptop, the blue screen casting shadows across her face. The browser history told the story of her desperation. Can a nonverbal child testify in court? Selective mutism and legal proceedings. Rights of child witnesses. How to protect traumatized children during trial. The articles painted a grim picture. Child testimony was already controversial, fraught with concerns about leading questions, false memories, and re-traumatization. But a child who couldn't speak. The legal precedents were murky at best. Some courts allowed alternative methods, drawings, dolls, play therapy techniques. But would that be enough to convict Mrs.? Sarah clicked on another tab, a news article from 2 weeks ago. Former owner walks free after witness recants. A case in Ohio. Similar charges. The key witness, a 4-year-old boy, had broken down on the stand, unable to continue his testimony. The judge had declared a mistrial. The owner never faced justice. That couldn't happen here. It couldn't. Sarah's mind drifted to the other families, the Johnsons, whose 5-year-old son still wet the bed and refused to sleep alone. The Martinez family, whose daughter had developed a stutter and panic attacks. They who'd found their son trying to lock himself in closets, saying he felt safer in small spaces. 7 families in total, all with children whose lives had been shattered by months or years at Sunshine. And then there were the families who didn't know yet. The ones whose children were too young to articulate what had happened or too afraid to speak up. If Mrs. walked free, she could open another under a different name. She could hurt more children. Emma's testimony could stop that. But at what cost? Sarah walked quietly to Emma's room, pushing the door open just enough to see her daughter sleeping fitfully. Even in sleep, Emma's face was tense, her small hands balled into fists clutching Mr. Hoppy. She whimpered, a sound that broke Sarah's heart because it was one of the few sounds Emma still made. "I'm sorry, baby," Sarah whispered. "I'm so sorry Mommy didn't protect you." The guilt was crushing. Sarah had trusted Sunshine. She'd done her research, or so she thought. The facility had good reviews, proper licensing, reasonable rates. Mrs. had seemed professional during the tour, friendly even. "We treat every child like our own," she'd said with that warm smile. Lies, all of it lies. Sarah had missed the signs. She'd been too busy, too tired, too focused on keeping their little family afloat after Emma's father had left. Single mother, full-time job, barely making rent. She'd needed that. She'd wanted to believe it was a good place. Now her daughter paid the price for that trust. The next morning, Sarah made the call she'd been dreading. Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Martinez answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and professional. "Ms., I'm glad you called. Have you had time to consider our request?" "She doesn't speak," Sarah said bluntly. "She hasn't said a word in 6 months. How exactly do you expect her to testify?" "We have specialists," Jennifer assured her. "Child psychologists who work with traumatized witnesses. We can use alternative communication methods." "She doesn't draw anything but scribbles. She doesn't play. She barely responds to anything." There was a pause. Sarah could hear papers shuffling on the other end. "Ms., I understand this is difficult, but we have 8 other children whose parents are counting on this case. Without Emma's testimony, our case is weak. She was there the longest. She saw patterns of behavior that the other children missed because they weren't enrolled as long. So you want to traumatize my daughter further for your case?" "I want to make sure the person who traumatized your daughter goes to prison," Jennifer countered, her voice harder now. "I want to make sure she never has the opportunity to hurt another child. Don't you want that too?" Sarah closed her eyes. "Of course I want that." "Then help us, please. We'll do everything we can to make this as gentle as possible for Emma. Judge is one of the most compassionate judges in family court. She has experience with cases like this." "There are no cases like this," Sarah said bitterly. "My daughter is drowning, and you want me to throw her into deeper water." "Or maybe," Jennifer said quietly, "testifying could help her heal. Maybe confronting what happened in a safe environment with support could be the breakthrough she needs. Trauma doesn't heal in silence, Ms. Sometimes it needs to be spoken or expressed somehow before the healing can begin." Could that be true? Sarah thought about all the therapy sessions, all the techniques they'd tried. Nothing had worked, but they'd never tried this. They'd never put Emma in a position where she had to communicate about what happened. What if Jennifer was right? What if this could actually help? Or what if it destroyed what little remained of her daughter's fragile psyche? Sarah looked at the calendar on her wall. The trial date was circled in red. November 18th, 1 week away. 7 days to decide whether to put her 3-year-old daughter through the most terrifying experience of her young life, or let the woman who had hurt her walk free. "I need to talk to Emma's therapist," Sarah finally said. "Of course, but Ms., we need an answer by Friday. The judge needs time to make accommodations if Emma is going to testify." After hanging up, Sarah sat in stunned silence. Doctor's words from their last session echoed in her mind. Emma is trapped inside her trauma. Something has to break through those walls, but I don't know what that something is. We haven't found it yet. Maybe they'd been looking in the wrong place. Maybe the path forward wasn't away from the trauma, but through it. Sarah picked up her phone and typed a text to Jennifer Martinez. "Schedule a meeting with the judge. I want to know exactly what protections will be in place for Emma. Then I'll decide." The answer came immediately. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Judge Chambers. Thank you, Ms. You're doing the right thing." Sarah stared at those last words. The right thing. She'd never felt less certain of anything in her entire life. Judge stood at her office window, watching the November rain streak down the glass. In 23 years on the bench, she'd presided over thousands of family court cases, custody battles, abuse allegations, juvenile proceedings. She'd seen the worst of humanity and occasionally the best, but Emma's case haunted her in a way few others had. The file sat open on her desk. She'd read it so many times she'd memorized every detail. 3-year-old victim, 6 months of selective mutism, critical witness to systematic child abuse. The legal puzzle seemed impossible. How do you get testimony from a child who cannot or will not speak? "Your 10 a.m. is here," her clerk David announced through the intercom. "Ms. and Ada Martinez." Turned from the window, straightening her jacket. "Send them in." Sarah looked like she hadn't slept in days. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hands twisted nervously around the strap of her purse. Ada Jennifer Martinez, by contrast, appeared polished and prepared, carrying a thick briefcase full of legal precedents and strategies. "Please sit," said warmly, gesturing to the chairs across from her desk. She deliberately came around to sit beside them rather than behind her imposing judicial bench. This conversation needed to be human, not hierarchical. "Ms. began, I want you to know that my primary concern in this case is Emma's. Not the conviction rate, not the legal precedents. Your daughter's mental and emotional health comes first." Sarah's eyes welled up. "Then you understand why I'm terrified of putting her through this." "I do, completely," leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "But I also believe that sometimes the path to healing runs through the darkest places. We just need to light the way carefully." Jennifer opened her briefcase, pulling out documents. "Your Honor, we've researched alternative testimony methods. We can use anatomically correct dolls, allow Emma to draw, perhaps use a therapy room instead of the formal courtroom." "None of that will work," Sarah interrupted, her voice cracking. "We've tried all of it. Emma doesn't engage, she just retreats further." Had expected this. She'd spent the past 3 days researching, making calls, exploring options that existed outside traditional legal frameworks. What she was about to propose was unconventional, some might even call it radical, but conventional approaches had failed this child. "What if," said slowly, "we brought in a specialist who succeeded where traditional therapy has failed?" Sarah looked up, hope flickering in her exhausted eyes. "What kind of specialist?" Pulled a folder from her desk drawer. Inside were articles, research papers, and testimonials about a relatively new but increasingly successful intervention, courthouse facility dogs. "Have you heard of animal-assisted therapy in legal settings?" Jennifer's eyebrows shot up. "You mean a therapy dog in court?" "Not just any therapy dog," clarified. "A certified courthouse facility dog, specifically trained to work with traumatized witnesses, particularly children. They're used in over 200 courthouses nationwide now. The research is compelling. Children who testify with a facility dog present show significantly reduced anxiety, are more likely to complete their testimony, and report feeling safer and more supported." She spread photos across the table. Golden retrievers, Labradors, gentle giants with kind eyes sitting calmly beside witness stands. Children with their hands buried in soft fur, finding courage to speak impossible truths. "There's a K-9 unit here in New York," continued. "I've already made some inquiries. They have a dog named Finn who's been trained specifically for this work. His handler, Officer David Martinez, has worked with dozens of traumatized witnesses over the past 4 years. His success rate is remarkable." Sarah picked up one of the photos. A little girl, maybe 5 years old, sitting on a witness stand with a golden retriever's head resting on her lap. The girl was smiling, actually smiling in a courtroom. "Emma loves animals," Sarah whispered. Before Sunshine, she would get so excited when we'd see dogs at the park. She'd squeal and clap her hands, beg me to let her pet them." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I'd forgotten that. I'd forgotten she used to be joyful." Felt the familiar tightening in her chest that came with cases involving children. She had Emma's age. The thought of them suffering, silent and afraid, was unbearable. The dog wouldn't testify for her, explained carefully, but his presence could provide enough comfort and security that Emma might be able to communicate in some way. Even if it's not traditional verbal testimony, even if it's pointing, nodding, some form of expression, it could be enough. Would that be admissible? Jennifer asked, her legal mind already working through the challenges. The defense will argue it's leading, that the dog's presence influences the child's responses. There's precedent, assured her. People v. in California, State v. in Washington. Courts have consistently ruled that facility dogs are no different than allowing a child to hold a stuffed animal or sit with a parent. They're a comfort item, not a form of influence. And the dogs are trained to remain neutral. They don't react to testimony, don't provide cues. Sarah was still staring at the photo. When can we meet him, Finn? I've arranged for Officer Martinez to bring Finn here tomorrow afternoon. No pressure, no commitment. Just let Emma meet him, see how she responds. If there's no connection, we'll explore other options. But if there is, paused, choosing her words carefully. If there is, we might have found the key to unlocking your daughter's voice. That night couldn't stop thinking about the case. She sat in her home study, her husband already asleep upstairs, reading through more research on facility dogs. The statistics were impressive. 90% of child witnesses who with a facility dog were able to complete their testimony without excessive trauma. Many parents reported that their children showed marked improvement after testifying, as if speaking their truth in a safe and supported environment had released something that had been trapped inside. But Emma's case was different. The other children in those studies could speak. They were afraid, traumatized, but verbal. Emma existed in a different category entirely. What if bringing her to court, even with the most gentle, supportive dog in the world, pushed her further away instead of drawing her back? Picked up her phone and dialed a number she'd been given. It rang 4 times before a deep, warm voice answered. Officer Martinez. This is Judge. I apologize for calling so late. No problem, Your Honor. I'm guessing this is about the case. It is. I need your honest assessment. You've worked with nonverbal children before. There was a pause. A few times. Kids who were so scared they'd frozen up. But I'll be straight with you, Judge. I've never worked with a case of prolonged selective mutism like this. 6 months is a long time. His heart sank slightly. So you don't think Finn can help? I didn't say that, David replied quickly. I said I haven't worked with a case exactly like this. But Finn, that dog has surprised me more times than I can count. He's got something special, an instinct for finding the wounded and helping them heal. If any dog can reach this little girl, it's him. Tell me about him. For the next 20 minutes, David told her Finn's story. How the golden retriever had washed out of traditional police work because he was too gentle, too empathetic. How David had recognized that those flaws were actually extraordinary gifts. How Finn seemed to sense trauma in people and responded with exactly the kind of quiet, steady presence they needed. There was this one case, David said, his voice growing softer. 7-year-old boy who'd witnessed his father murder his mother. Kid hadn't spoken in 2 months. We brought Finn into the interview room and that dog just walked up and laid his head in the kid's lap. Didn't move, just stayed there. After 10 minutes, the boy started petting him. After 20, he started crying. After 30, he started talking. Told investigators everything they needed to know. Do you think he can do that for Emma? I think, David said carefully, that Finn will do whatever Emma needs him to do. Whether that's enough, whether that breaks through her walls, I honestly don't know, Judge. But I believe it's worth trying. Because right now, that little girl is trapped. And sometimes all it takes is one connection, one moment of feeling safe for a trapped child to find their way out. Thanked him and hung up, feeling cautiously hopeful for the first time in days. Tomorrow, Emma would meet Finn. And maybe, just maybe, a golden-furred miracle would give a silent child her voice back. The courthouse loomed like a fortress of gray stone and glass, its steps worn smooth by decades of desperate footsteps. Sarah sat in her car in the parking lot, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to do anything but stare at the building where she was about to hand her daughter over to a system that felt more like a machine than a path to justice. Emma sat silently in her car seat, Mr. Hoppy clutched to her chest, staring at nothing. She'd barely touched her breakfast. She hadn't resisted getting dressed, but she hadn't helped either, just stood like a small mannequin while Sarah pulled the blue flowered dress over her head, the one Emma had pointed to when given a choice. At least she could still make choices, even if she couldn't speak them. "Okay, baby," Sarah whispered, her voice shaking. "It's time." The walk from the car to the courthouse entrance felt like miles. Sarah carried Emma, feeling her daughter's heart racing against her chest like a trapped bird. Other people streamed past them, lawyers in expensive suits, families with worry etched on their faces, court officers with bored expressions. To them, this was just another Tuesday. To Sarah, it was the day that would either save or shatter her daughter. Security was a nightmare. The metal detector beeped and a stern-faced officer asked Sarah to remove Emma's shoes. "She's 3, Sarah protested. "She's not hiding anything." But rules were rules, and Emma's tiny sneakers went through the X-ray machine. Emma's breathing became rapid and shallow, the panic response Sarah had learned to recognize. "Almost done, sweetie, almost done." Judge's courtroom was on the 3rd floor. Sarah's sister Maria was waiting by the elevators, holding 2 cups of coffee and looking as exhausted as Sarah felt. "You made it," Maria said, pulling Sarah into a one-armed hug. "How's our girl?" Sarah just shook her head. Words wouldn't come. The courtroom itself was smaller than Sarah had imagined, but no less intimidating. Dark wood paneling lined the walls. The judge's bench sat elevated like a throne. Rows of gallery seats stretched behind a dividing rail. The witness stand, where Emma would somehow have to testify, looked impossibly large and exposed. The room was already filling with people. Sarah recognized the other parents, the Johnsons, the Martinez family, They'd formed a support group over the past months, united by their children's trauma and their hunger for justice. Mrs. Johnson caught Sarah's eye and mouthed, "You've got this." But the fear in her expression said otherwise. Then there were the others. Journalists with notepads, their eyes predatory and curious. Court observers, law students, people who treated trauma like entertainment. And at the defense table, surrounded by expensive lawyers in tailored suits, sat Mrs. herself. Sarah had only seen her once since pulling Emma from a brief, horrible encounter in the grocery store, where Mrs. had smiled that cold smile and said, "Such a shame about the misunderstanding." As if systematically terrorizing children was a misunderstanding. As if Emma's silence was just an unfortunate miscommunication. Now Mrs. sat with perfect posture, her gray hair styled immaculately, wearing a soft pink cardigan that made her look like someone's kindly grandmother. It was a costume, Sarah knew, calculated and deliberate. The defense strategy was clear. Make the jury see a harmless old woman, not the monster who'd locked sobbing toddlers in dark closets. "All rise." Judge entered, her black robes flowing, her expression serious but not unkind. She surveyed the packed courtroom with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Please be seated. Before we begin formal proceedings, I need to address some preliminary matters in chambers. Ms., would you please bring Emma?" Sarah's legs nearly gave out. This was it. The moment Emma would meet Finn, if Emma would meet Finn. There was still a chance her daughter would refuse, would retreat further, would make this entire terrible gamble pointless. Judge's chambers were surprisingly warm. Books lined the walls, family photos sat on her desk, and a comfortable couch replaced the harsh wooden benches of the courtroom. Ada Jennifer Martinez was already there, along with a defense attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Thornton who'd already filed 3 motions to exclude Emma's testimony. "Ms. Thornton," Judge said firmly, "I'm allowing the courthouse facility dog to be present during Emma's testimony. This is non-negotiable." Your Honor, my client objects strenuously. A dog creates sympathy, influences the jury. Your objection is noted and overruled. There's ample precedent and you know it. Judge Stone left no room for argument. She turned to Sarah, her expression softening. Officer Martinez is waiting in the adjacent conference room with Finn. Would you like to bring Emma to meet him? No pressure, no expectations. Just see what happens. Sarah's hands trembled as she stood. Emma felt heavier somehow, as if the weight of what was about to happen had added physical mass to her small body. Come on, baby. Let's meet a new friend. The conference room door opened, and Sarah's breath caught. Officer David Martinez was a tall man with kind eyes and an easy smile, dressed in his K-9 unit uniform. But Sarah barely noticed him. Her attention was completely captured by the dog sitting calmly at his side. Finn was beautiful, a golden retriever with a coat that seemed to glow in the fluorescent light, intelligent brown eyes that radiated warmth, and an expression of such gentle patience that Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. He wore a vest that identified him as a courthouse facility dog, and with paw prints around his neck. This is Finn, Officer Martinez said quietly. He's very excited to meet Emma. As if understanding his cue, Finn's tail began to wag slowly, sweeping across the floor. But he didn't move forward, didn't rush or overwhelm. He simply sat waiting, as if he had all the time in the world. Sarah felt Emma's body shift slightly in her arms, the first voluntary movement her daughter had made all morning. Would you like to sit on the floor with me? Officer Martinez suggested, lowering himself to sit cross-legged. Sometimes that helps, makes everyone the same height. Sarah sank down, settling Emma in her lap. They were about 6 feet from Finn, close enough to see the gentle rise and fall of his breathing, far enough that Emma didn't feel crowded. The room fell silent. Judge Jennifer Martinez, even the defense attorney, everyone seemed to understand that something important was happening. Finn remained perfectly still, but his eyes never left Emma. There was something in that gaze, something Sarah couldn't quite name. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. As if the dog could see the wounded soul inside her daughter and was offering silent companionship to someone who understood pain. Minutes passed. Sarah counted them, each one feeling like an eternity. Emma stared at Finn. Finn stared back, patient and unwavering. His tail continued its slow, rhythmic wag. Then, so slowly that Sarah almost missed it, Emma's hand moved. Just a few inches, releasing its death grip on Mr. Hoppy, fingers stretching tentatively toward the golden dog who sat watching her with infinite kindness. Officer Martinez caught Sarah's eye and gave the slightest nod. "Finn," he said softly, "go say hello." The golden retriever rose gracefully and walked forward with measured steps, closing the distance between himself and the silent little girl who'd lived in darkness for so long. He stopped just within reach, lowered his head, and waited. Emma's hand trembled in the air between them. The entire room held its breath. And then, with a movement so gentle it barely disturbed the air, Emma's fingers touched Finn's soft golden fur. The dog's tail wagged faster. Emma's hand pressed deeper into his coat. And for the first time in 6 months, Sarah saw something in her daughter's eyes that had been missing since that terrible October day. "Hope. Good boy," Officer Martinez whispered to Finn. Good boy." Emma's lips moved, forming shapes that Sarah couldn't quite see. Was she trying to speak? After all this time, was the spell finally breaking? Judge leaned forward slightly, her own eyes bright with unshed tears. Jennifer Martinez gripped her folder so tightly her knuckles turned white. Even Thornton, the defense attorney who'd spent weeks trying to exclude Emma from testifying, looked transfixed by the scene unfolding before them. This was the moment. This was the chance. Everything balanced on the edge of a little girl's silence and a golden dog's patient love. Sarah closed her eyes and prayed to whatever deity might be listening. Please let this work. Please give my baby her voice back." The courtroom awaited, justice awaited, 7 families' hopes awaited. And in a quiet conference room in a Brooklyn courthouse, a 3-year-old girl named Emma touched a dog named Finn and felt, for the first time in half a year, that maybe, just maybe, it might be safe to speak again. The walk from Judge Chambers back to the courtroom felt different this time. Emma was still silent, still clutching Mr. Hoppy, but something fundamental had shifted. She kept turning her head, looking back at Officer Martinez and Finn, who followed a few paces behind. Her eyes, those haunted, hollow eyes that had stared at nothing for 6 months, were focused, present, tracking the golden retriever's every movement. "He'll be right there with you," Sarah whispered, squeezing Emma's hand. "Finn's going to sit next to you the whole time. He won't leave." Officer Martinez had explained the process during those precious minutes in the conference room. Finn would accompany Emma to the witness stand. He'd sit or lie beside her, within reach but not intrusive. He wouldn't react to testimony, wouldn't provide cues. He'd simply be there, a steady, warm presence in a cold and frightening place. "Dogs are honest," Martinez had said, scratching behind Finn's ears. "They don't judge, don't have agendas. For traumatized kids, that honesty is everything. It's permission to feel safe again." Now, as they re-entered the courtroom, Sarah felt every eye turn toward them. The murmur of conversation died instantly. Everyone had heard what happened in Chambers, how Emma had touched the dog, how something had flickered to life in her expression. The entire courtroom seemed to lean forward collectively, hoping for a miracle. Mrs. Face remained impassive, but her lawyer looked annoyed. Thornton stood immediately. "Your Honor, I must renew my objection. This is theater, not testimony. The presence of this animal is designed to manipulate the jury's emotions." "Ms. Thornton, I've ruled. Sit down." Judge's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. "The dog stays. If you wish to appeal my decision, you may do so after the trial. But right now, we're proceeding." Sarah carried Emma toward the witness stand, her heart hammering so hard she could barely hear over the sound of her own blood rushing through her ears. The witness chair had been modified, a booster seat added to bring Emma high enough to see over the railing, a small table placed within reach with paper and crayons in case Emma chose to communicate through drawing. Finn walked beside them with calm dignity, his tail wagging slowly, his eyes never leaving Emma. When Sarah set Emma down in the chair, the little girl's face went pale. Her breathing quickened. Her hands gripped Mr. Hoppy so tightly Sarah heard the fabric strain. But then Officer Martinez gave a quiet command, "Finn, place." The golden retriever moved to Emma's right side and settled onto the floor, his body pressed against the witness stand, his head perfectly positioned so Emma could reach down and touch him. And touch him she did. Without hesitation, Emma's small hand dropped from Mr. Hoppy and found its home in Finn's soft fur. The tension in Emma's body didn't disappear, but it lessened. Her breathing slowed from panicked gasps to something more manageable. Her eyes, which had been darting around the courtroom in terror, fixed on the dog beside her. Sarah moved to sit in the front row, close enough that Emma could see her but far enough to give her daughter space. Maria gripped Sarah's hand, both of them trembling. Judge spoke first, her voice gentle. "Emma, my name is Judge. Do you know why you're here today?" Silence, but Emma's eyes flickered toward the judge, acknowledging the question even if she couldn't answer it. "You don't have to speak if you're not ready," Judge continued. "But I want you to know that everyone in this room is here to help you. We're here to listen. And Finn is going to stay right there beside you, okay?" Emma's hand moved rhythmically through Finn's fur, fingers tracing patterns, finding comfort in the repetitive motion. The dog remained absolutely still, his brown eyes half closed in contentment, as if this, being a pillow for a frightened child, was his only purpose in the world. Ada Jennifer Martinez approached the witness stand slowly, her movements deliberate and non-threatening. She changed out of her usual sharp suit into softer clothing, a cardigan and slacks, trying to appear less intimidating. She held a folder of photos, visual aids meant to help Emma communicate if words wouldn't come. "Hi, Emma," Jennifer said softly. "I'm Jennifer. I love your dress. Blue is my favorite color, too." No response, but Emma didn't look away. That was progress. "Emma, I'm going to show you some pictures, and I want you to point if you see something you recognize. You don't have to say anything. Just point. Can you do that?" Emma's hand stilled in Finn's fur. The courtroom held its collective breath. Jennifer held up the first photo, a picture of Sunshine's exterior, the cheerful yellow building with its playground visible. "Do you know this place?" For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, so slowly that Sarah almost missed it, Emma nodded. Just once. Barely perceptible, but it was a response. The first voluntary communication Emma had made about since that terrible October day. "Good," Jennifer said, her voice warm with encouragement. "You're doing so well, Emma, so brave." She held up another photo, the interior of the main playroom with its colorful toys and small tables. "Did you play here?" Another nod, stronger this time. Sarah's tears flowed freely now. Her daughter was communicating, actually responding. Maria squeezed her hand so tight it hurt, but Sarah didn't care. Jennifer continued, showing photos of different rooms, different areas. With each image, Emma responded with small nods or, in one case involving the dark storage room, a visible flinch that told the jury everything they needed to know. Then Jennifer held up a photo of Mrs. The reaction was instantaneous and visceral. Emma's entire body went rigid. Her hand clenched in Finn's fur, pulling hard enough that most dogs would have yelped or moved away. But Finn simply pressed closer, offering more of himself for Emma to hold onto. A small whimper escaped Emma's throat, the sound of a wounded animal. "It's okay," Jennifer said quickly. "You're safe. That person can't hurt you anymore. I'm going to put this picture away now." But the damage was done. Emma's fragile composure shattered. Her breathing became ragged. Tears streamed down her face. She looked desperately toward Sarah, silently begging to be rescued from this horrible place. Sarah started to rise, ready to end this torture, but Judge held up a hand. "Wait," the judge mouthed. Because something was happening. Finn had shifted position. The golden retriever, who'd remained perfectly still throughout the testimony, lifted his head and placed it directly in Emma's lap. His weight, warm and solid and real, pressed against her small legs. His brown eyes looked up at her with such profound understanding that even the cynical journalists in the gallery felt their throats tighten. Emma looked down at the dog. Her hands, which had been clutching Mr. Hoppy again, slowly released the stuffed rabbit. One hand went to Finn's head, the other to his soft ear. She held on like he was a life raft in a storming sea. And then, in the absolute silence of that packed courtroom, Emma's lips began to move. No sound came out at first, just the shape of words, the ghost of speech. Officer Martinez leaned forward slightly, his expression intent. He'd seen this before, the moment when a traumatized witness found their voice by first finding the courage to try. "Take your time," Jennifer whispered. "Whatever you need to say, we're listening." Emma's fingers twisted in Finn's fur. Her eyes locked onto the dog's patient, loving gaze. The entire courtroom seemed to fade away, the judge, the jury, the journalists, even Sarah. In that moment, there was only a little girl and a golden dog, and the invisible thread of trust connecting them. Emma's lips moved again. This time a sound emerged, soft, barely audible but real. F, the consonant hung in the air. Everyone leaned forward. Stenographers' fingers hovered over keyboards. The jury members collectively held their breath. Emma tried again, the syllable stronger now. Officer Martinez felt his own eyes burn with tears. He knew what was coming. He'd seen it happen before, this moment when a dog's unconditional love gave someone permission to be brave. And then, clear as a bell, cutting through 6 months of silence like a knife through darkness. Emma spoke two perfect words that would change everything. Good dog. The courtroom erupted. The sound that erupted from the courtroom was unlike anything Sarah had ever heard. It wasn't quite applause, wasn't quite cheering. It was a collective exhale of relief, hope, and disbelief all mixed together. Strangers wept openly. The jury members looked at each other with wide eyes. Even the court reporter, who'd witnessed countless dramatic moments, had tears streaming down her face. Good dog, Emma said again, louder this time, more confident. Her small hand stroked Finn's head with increasing boldness. Good dog. Judge's gavel came down sharply. Order. I need order in this courtroom. But her voice cracked with emotion, betraying the professional composure she'd maintained for 2 decades. She dabbed at her eyes with her sleeve, not even trying to hide the tears. Sarah couldn't breathe. 6 months of silence, 6 months of therapy and specialists and desperate hopes, and it was a dog, this beautiful, gentle golden retriever, who'd unlocked her daughter's voice. She pressed her hands to her mouth, sobbing so hard her entire body shook. Maria wrapped her arms around her sister, both of them clinging to each other like shipwreck survivors. Officer Martinez blinked rapidly, clearing his vision. He'd worked with Finn for 4 years, seen the dog perform miracles, but this was something beyond his experience. He watched as Finn's tail began to wag faster, as if the dog understood the magnitude of what had just happened. "That's my boy," Martinez whispered. "That's my good boy." Ada Jennifer Martinez recovered first, her legal training kicking in. This was the breakthrough they needed, but she had to be careful. Push too hard and Emma might retreat. Move too slow and the moment might pass. She approached the witness stand with slow, measured steps. "Emma," Jennifer said softly, "that's right. Finn is a very good dog, he's your friend." Emma nodded, still petting Finn, her eyes never leaving the golden retriever's face. "Nice doggy," she added, her voice small but growing steadier with each word. "Emma, can you tell us about Sunshine?" The little girl's expression clouded. Her hand stilled in Finn's fur. For a terrible moment, Sarah thought Emma would slip back into silence. But then Emma looked up at Jennifer, and in a voice that carried across the hushed courtroom, she spoke. "Bad place." 2 more words, but these carried the weight of months of trauma. "What made it a bad place?" Jennifer asked gently. Emma's face scrunched up, struggling to find words that could express experiences too awful for a 3-year-old vocabulary. "Dark room," she said finally. "Cold, scared." Thornton half rose from the defense table, objection dying on her lips as Judge shot her a warning glare. This testimony was happening, and nothing was going to stop it. "Who put you in the dark room?" Jennifer continued. Emma's finger rose slowly, trembling, pointing directly at Mrs. Bad Lady. Mrs. carefully constructed grandmother facade cracked. Her face flushed red. She leaned toward her attorney, whispering urgently, but Thornton could only shake her head. There was no legal maneuver that could undo what was happening. "The Bad Lady," Jennifer repeated carefully. "Can you tell us what the Bad Lady did?" And then, with Finn pressed against her side, with his warm weight grounding her, Emma began to talk. The words came in fragments, in simple 3-year-old phrases, but each one landed like a hammer blow. "Lock the door," Emma said, her voice breaking. "We cried, she didn't come, hungry, so hungry, no food, just crackers, sometimes nothing." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. She'd known about the neglect, had read the reports from other parents, but hearing it from Emma's own lips made it devastatingly real. "Tyler peed his pants," Emma continued, the words coming faster now as if a dam had broken. "Bad Lady yelled, made him sit in timeout all day. He cried and cried, she didn't care." Jennifer showed Emma another photo, this one of the storage closet. "Is this the dark room?" Emma nodded, her whole body tensing. "Bad room. She put me there, said I was being bad, but I wasn't bad, I just wanted my mommy." Tears streamed down Emma's face, but she kept talking. Her hand moved constantly through Finn's fur, drawing strength from the dog's steady presence. Finn remained absolutely still except for his eyes, which tracked Emma's face with such intense concern that it seemed almost human. "How long did she leave you in the dark room?" Jennifer asked. Emma struggled with the concept of time. "Forever," she whispered. "Dark and dark and dark. I banged on the door. Nobody came. I got sleepy. I peed my pants too. Then Bad Lady came and yelled at me." The jury members were no longer hiding their emotions. Two women openly wept. A man in the back row had his fist pressed against his mouth, his face twisted in anguish. Even the court officers, who'd seen countless cases of child abuse, looked shaken. "Emma, were there other children who got locked in the dark room?" "Yes, lots. Sarah and Michael and Justin and—" Emma listed names, her small voice gaining strength with each one. "We were all scared. Bad Lady said if we told our mommies and daddies, something bad would happen. She said nobody would believe us anyway." Jennifer turned to the jury, letting Emma's words sink in. Then she asked the question that would seal the case. "Emma, when you were in the dark room, how did you feel?" Emma's eyes filled with fresh tears. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Thought Mommy forgot me. Thought nobody loved me anymore. Wanted to disappear." Sarah made a sound like a wounded animal. She tried to stand to run to her daughter, but Maria held her back. "Let her finish," Maria whispered urgently. "She needs to finish." Emma looked across the courtroom and found her mother's eyes. "But Mommy came," she said, louder now. "Mommy took me away. I wanted to tell Mommy, but the words were stuck. The Bad Lady put them somewhere I couldn't find them." She looked back down at Finn, burying her face in his soft fur. "But Doggy helped me find them. Doggy made me feel safe. Doggy doesn't yell. Doggy just loves." Officer Martinez felt his throat close up completely. In 4 years of working with Finn, he'd never heard the dog's purpose expressed so perfectly. This was exactly what facility dogs did. They loved unconditionally, without judgment, without demands. They created safe spaces where traumatized souls could finally speak their truths. Jennifer knelt beside the witness stand, bringing herself to Emma's eye level. "Emma, you are so incredibly brave. Do you know that? You're helping all those other children you named. You're making sure the Bad Lady can't hurt anyone else." Emma lifted her head from Finn's fur. "No more dark rooms." "No more dark rooms," Jennifer promised. "Never again." "Good," Emma said firmly. Then she looked down at Finn again and added with absolute certainty, "Good dog saved me." Judge had to call a 15-minute recess. Half the courtroom was sobbing. The jury needed to compose themselves. Even Thornton looked pale and shaken, knowing that her client's fate was sealed. During the recess, Sarah was finally allowed to approach Emma. She scooped her daughter into her arms, holding her so tightly that Emma squeaked. "My brave girl," Sarah sobbed. "My beautiful, brave baby girl." Emma patted her mother's wet cheek. "Don't cry, Mommy. Doggy is here. Doggy makes everything okay." And somehow, impossibly, that was true. A golden retriever named Finn had given a voiceless child her words back. He'd created a space safe enough for truth to emerge from 6 months of traumatic silence. He'd stood between a little girl and her monsters and said, without words but with infinite patience, "You are safe now. You can speak." As Sarah held Emma close, she felt Finn's head rest against her leg, as if the dog was offering comfort to both of them. She reached down with one hand to stroke his soft fur. "Thank you," she whispered to him. "Thank you for giving me my daughter back." Finn's tail wagged slowly, and in his warm brown eyes, Sarah saw the simple truth that dogs have always known. Love heals. Patience opens doors. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is just be present while someone else finds their courage. The trial would continue. Emma's testimony wasn't quite finished, but the hardest part was over. The silence had been shattered. The truth had been spoken. And a little girl named Emma had proven that even the deepest darkness can't withstand the light of one good dog's unconditional love. When court reconvened, the atmosphere had fundamentally shifted. What had begun as a tense legal proceeding had transformed into something more profound, a collective witness to a child's courage. The jury members returned to their seats with red-rimmed eyes and determined expressions. They'd heard enough to know which way justice needed to flow. Emma sat back in the witness chair, one hand resting on Finn's head, the other clutching Mr. Hoppy. She looked tired but somehow lighter, as if speaking her truth had lifted a weight she'd been carrying for too long. Sarah watched from the front row, her heart still racing, still hardly believing her daughter's voice had returned. Judge leaned forward gently. "Emma, honey, I have just a few more questions and then you can go be with your mommy. Is that okay?" Emma nodded, her fingers tracing circles in Finn's golden fur. "You mentioned other children," Judge said carefully. "Can you tell me their names again, the other children who were locked in the dark room?" Emma's brow furrowed in concentration. "Sarah Martinez, she's 5, she cried a lot. And Michael Johnson, he's 4, and Justin, he's 3 like me, and," she paused, thinking hard, "and baby Lily, she was really little, just this big." Emma held her hands apart to show how small. Jennifer Martinez stood, holding up photos of each child Emma had named. "Emma, can you point to the children you just talked about?" One by one, Emma identified them. Each correct identification was another nail in the prosecution's case. The jury took meticulous notes. Several parents in the gallery, the families Emma had named, wept with gratitude that their children's suffering was finally being validated. "What happened to baby Lily?" Jennifer asked, her voice gentle but firm. Emma's face crumpled. She cried and cried. "Bad lady got mad, put her in the crib and closed the door. We could hear her crying all day. When bad lady finally got her, Lily was," Emma struggled for words, "not right, sick. Her diaper was so full it leaked. She had red marks on her skin." A juror gasped audibly. Mrs. Face had gone from red to ashen. She whispered urgently to Thornton, who could only shake her head helplessly. "Emma," Jennifer continued, "did the bad lady ever give you enough food?" "No, breakfast was just crackers. Lunch was sometimes crackers, sometimes nothing. She said we were bad and didn't deserve food. I was so hungry my tummy hurt all the time." "Did you tell anyone?" Emma's voice became very small. "Bad lady said if we told, she'd put us in the dark room forever. She said our mommies and daddies would give us away because we were bad children. I believed her." Sarah pressed her fist to her mouth, swallowing a sob. The manipulation, the psychological abuse, it was almost worse than the physical neglect. "But you're telling now," Jennifer said. "Why?" Emma looked down at Finn, whose brown eyes gazed up at her with infinite patience. "Because Doggy makes me brave, and because," she looked across the courtroom at her mother, "because Mommy didn't give me away. Mommy loves me even when I couldn't talk, so bad lady was lying." It was perhaps the most devastating testimony Jennifer had ever heard. The simple logic of a 3-year-old, cutting through months of trauma to arrive at a truth that would put her abuser behind bars. Jennifer nodded, satisfied. "No further questions, Your Honor." Now came the moment everyone dreaded, cross-examination. Thornton approached the witness stand with visible reluctance. She'd built a career on aggressive defense strategies, but even she understood the optics of attacking a traumatized 3-year-old who just broken 6 months of silence. "Emma," began, her voice carefully neutral, "you said these things happened a long time ago. 6 months is a very long time for someone your age. Are you sure you remember correctly?" Emma nodded firmly. "I remember, I dream about it every night. The dark room is in my dreams." Shifted tactics. "Your mommy loves you very much, doesn't she?" "Yes." "And she wants the bad lady to go to jail, doesn't she?" Jennifer Martinez shot to her feet. "Objection, leading and inappropriate." Sustained, Judge said sharply. Ms. Thornton, if you're suggesting this child has been coached, you're on very thin ice. Tried once more. Emma, is it possible you're confused? Maybe some of these things happen at home, not at the... No, Emma's voice rose, startling everyone. Finn's head lifted slightly, his eyes alert. It was the bad lady. She locked us in the dark room. She did. Emma's breathing became rapid, panic creeping back into her voice. Judge intervened immediately. Ms. Thornton, that's enough, step back. But Emma wasn't finished. With Finn pressed against her leg, she found her courage again. I'm not confused, she said, her small voice carrying across the courtroom with unexpected strength. I know what happened. Bad lady hurt us. And I'm not lying, I'm not. Thornton looked at the jury. Their expressions told her everything she needed to know. This cross-examination was doing more harm than good to her client's case. No further questions, she said quietly, returning to her seat. Mrs. leaned toward her attorney, hissing something angry, but just shook her head. The case was lost. They both knew it. The prosecution called several more witnesses. Dr. Emma's therapist, about selective mutism and childhood trauma. Other parents took the stand, describing their children's behavioral changes and the fragments of stories their kids had shared. Medical experts presented evidence of neglect, malnutrition, untreated diaper rash, signs of prolonged stress in toddlers. But none of it carried the weight of Emma's testimony. That small, brave voice speaking truth after 6 months of silence, that was what would decide this case. The trial lasted 3 more days, but the outcome was never in doubt. When the jury returned after just 2 hours of deliberation, the verdict was unanimous. On the charge of child endangerment in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of willful neglect of a minor, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of unlawful imprisonment. 17 counts in total, guilty on every single one. Mrs. Composure finally shattered. She collapsed in her chair, her attorneys attempting to console her as the judge read the verdict. But there was no consolation for what she'd done, no excuse for the systematic torture of helpless children. The parents in the gallery held each other, crying with relief. Justice had been served. Judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later, but she made her intentions clear. Mrs., you were entrusted with the care of vulnerable children, and you betrayed that trust in the most heinous way imaginable. You will face the maximum penalty under the law. As the court officers led Mrs. away in handcuffs, Sarah gathered Emma in her arms. Her daughter's face was buried in her shoulder, but Sarah could feel her smiling. Is the bad lady going away? Emma asked. Yes, baby, for a very long time. Good, no more dark rooms for anybody. No more dark rooms for anybody, Sarah confirmed, her voice breaking. Emma lifted her head and looked around for Finn. The golden retriever sat nearby with Officer Martinez, tail wagging slowly. Can I say goodbye to Doggy? Officer Martinez brought Finn over, and Emma slid from her mother's arms to kneel beside the dog. She wrapped her small arms around Finn's neck, burying her face in his fur. Thank you, good dog, she whispered. You saved me, you're my hero. Finn's tail wagged harder, and he gently licked Emma's cheek, making her giggle. The first genuine laugh Sarah had heard from her daughter in 6 months. Officer Martinez knelt beside them. Emma, Finn wants you to know something. You saved yourself. You were brave enough to speak. Finn just helped you remember you were safe. Emma considered this seriously. We saved each other. Exactly, Martinez said, his voice thick with emotion. 2 weeks later, at sentencing, Judge showed no mercy. Mrs. received the maximum sentence, 25 years in prison with no possibility of parole. She'd be 78 years old before she saw freedom again. But the real victory was quieter, more personal. That same week, Emma spoke her first complete sentence at home. Mommy, can we have pancakes for breakfast? Sarah had cried into the pancake batter, overwhelmed with gratitude. The nightmares didn't stop immediately. The healing wasn't instantaneous. But Emma was talking now, telling her stories, expressing her fears, asking for help when the memories became too heavy. And once a week, Officer Martinez brought Finn to visit. Those became Emma's favorite days, the ones she marked on the calendar with bright red circles. The golden retriever who'd given her back her voice remained a constant source of comfort as she navigated the long road to recovery. The case made national headlines. 3-year-old's testimony brings justice, the newspapers proclaimed. But for Sarah, the headline should have been simpler. Good dog saves little girl. Because that's exactly what happened. 3 months after the trial, Sarah stood in her kitchen making chocolate chip pancakes, Emma's favorite, while her daughter sat at the table chattering about everything and nothing. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. The silent, hollow-eyed child who'd haunted their apartment for 6 months had blossomed back into the vibrant, curious, talkative little girl Sarah remembered. And then Finn chased the ball, but he tripped over his own feet and rolled. And it was so funny, Mommy. He's silly sometimes for a hero dog. Emma kicked her feet under the table, animated and alive in a way that still brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Today was special. Officer Martinez was bringing Finn for their weekly visit, but this time, there was another purpose. Judge was coming too, along with a reporter from the New York Times. Emma's story had sparked something bigger than any of them had anticipated, a movement to expand courthouse facility dog programs across the entire country. The doorbell rang and Emma shrieked with joy. Finn! She scrambled from her chair and ran to the door, something she'd been too afraid to do just months ago. When Sarah opened it, Emma dropped to her knees as Finn bounded inside, his tail wagging furiously. The two of them, little girl and golden dog, tumbled together in a heap of giggles and licks and pure, uncomplicated joy. He missed you, Officer Martinez said with a grin, stepping inside. Behind him came Judge, carrying a folder of documents, and the Times reporter who'd been following Emma's story since the trial. Emma, Sarah said gently, these people want to talk to us about what happened, about how Finn helped you. Is that okay? Emma looked up from where she was buried in Finn's fur. To help other kids. Yes, baby, to help other kids who are scared like you were. Emma nodded seriously. Okay, because every scared kid needs a Finn. They settled in the living room, Emma insisting that Finn sit right beside her on the couch. Set up a recording device with Sarah's permission, and Judge pulled out statistics and proposals that told the story of what Emma's courage had started. After your case, Judge began, addressing Emma directly, 17 other courthouses in New York requested facility dog programs. Across the country, we've had inquiries from 43 states. Your story showed people what's possible when we give traumatized witnesses the support they need. Emma stroked Finn's ears thoughtfully. Does that mean more kids get good dogs? Exactly that, Judge confirmed, her eyes soft. Because of you and Finn, hundreds of children will have facility dogs with them when they have to talk about scary things. Leaned forward. Emma, can you tell me what Finn did that made you feel safe enough to talk? Emma considered the question with the seriousness of someone much older. Finn didn't need me to talk. He just loved me anyway. Bad Lady always said we were bad kids, that nobody would love us if we told. But Finn, she buried her face in his fur briefly, Finn loved me even when I was quiet. That made me think maybe it was okay to not be quiet anymore. Sarah's throat tightened. Even now, months later, hearing Emma articulate her trauma was almost unbearable, but it was necessary. This story needed to be told so other children could be saved. Officer Martinez spoke up. Finn has worked with 11 other child witnesses since Emma's case. 9 of them completed their testimony successfully. The 2 who couldn't speak still communicated through other means, drawing, nodding, but they felt safe enough to participate. That's Finn's gift. He creates safe spaces. What about the other kids from Sunshine? Asked. The ones Emma named in her testimony. Sarah pulled out her phone, showing photos of play dates and support group meetings. We've stayed in touch with all the families. Michael Johnson is back in preschool and doing well. Sarah Martinez still has nightmares, but she's talking about them now with her therapist. Justin started speaking again about a month after Emma did. His parents think seeing her testimony inspired him. And baby Lily. Sarah's voice caught. She's 2 now, thriving with her foster family after her parents lost custody for leaving her in that place. Judge added, all 7 families from the original case have formed a foundation, Voices for Voiceless Children. They're advocating for stricter regulations, mandatory trauma training for workers, and expanded courthouse support programs. Emma had been listening quietly, but now she spoke up. Mommy, can we get a dog like Finn, a real one for always? Sarah and Officer Martinez exchanged glances. They discussed this possibility before. Actually, Sarah said carefully, Officer Martinez knows about a golden retriever puppy who needs a home. He's 8 weeks old and his name is Hero, Emma squealed. We should name him Hero, because Finn is a hero, so his puppy brother should be Hero too. Officer Martinez laughed. Actually, that's perfect. I was going to suggest Hope, but Hero is better. And yes, Emma, if your mom agrees, you can adopt him next week. The interview continued for another hour, but Emma's attention was mostly on Finn, imagining the puppy who would soon join their family. When finally packed up her equipment, she had tears in her eyes. This is the most hopeful story I've covered in 15 years of journalism, she said. Thank you for sharing it. 2 weeks later, the New York Times ran a front-page story. How a therapy dog and a brave 3-year-old changed courthouse testimony forever. The article included photos of Emma and Finn, of judge signing orders to establish permanent facility dog programs, of Officer Martinez training new handler teams. But the most powerful image was the final photo, Emma holding a squirming golden retriever puppy, her face radiant with joy, while Finn sat beside them looking proud. The caption read, Emma with her new puppy Hero and Finn, the courthouse facility dog who helped her find her voice. Every scared kid deserves a Finn, Emma says. Now, thanks to her courage, more will have one. The article went viral. Within 6 months, Congress passed the Courthouse Facility Dog Act, providing federal funding for therapy dog programs in courtrooms nationwide. Judge before Congress, with Emma and Finn appearing beside her, the living proof of why this program mattered. 1 year after the trial, Sarah received a letter from a mother in Oregon. Her 6-year-old son had witnessed a crime and was too terrified to testify until he met a courthouse facility dog named Buddy. With Buddy beside him, he'd found his courage, just like Emma had with Finn. Your daughter saved my son, the letter read. Thank you for being brave enough to let her story be told. Emma's bedroom wall filled with similar letters. Hundreds of them from families across the country, from children who'd found their voices with the help of facility dogs, from prosecutors who'd seen justice served, because traumatized witnesses felt safe enough to speak. On the 2-year anniversary of Emma's testimony, the family returned to Judge's courtroom for a ceremony. Emma, now 5 years old and thriving in kindergarten, wore her favorite blue dress, not the one from the trial which she'd, but a new one that looked similar. Hero, now a 1.5 years old and almost as big as Finn, walked beside her on a leash. Finn was there too, though grayer around the muzzle now, ready to retire from courthouse work. Officer Martinez had decided that Finn had earned his rest. The golden retriever had helped 43 child witnesses over his career. Emma had been his crowning achievement, the case that changed everything. Judge presented Emma with a special certificate for extraordinary courage in the face of trauma and for inspiring a national movement to protect children in legal proceedings. Emma accepted it solemnly, then bent down to hug Finn. Thank you for being my good dog, she whispered into his fur. You'll always be my hero." Finn's tail wagged slowly, and he licked her face with the same gentle patience he'd shown in that courtroom 2 years ago. After the ceremony, Sarah watched Emma play with Hero in the courthouse garden, chasing butterflies and laughing without restraint. The nightmares were rare now, maybe once a month instead of every night. Emma still saw Doctor weekly, still had moments when the memories surfaced, but she was healing. Actually, genuinely healing. Officer Martinez stood beside Sarah, watching Finn supervise the younger dog's play. "You know what the best part is," he said. "We've trained 12 new facility dogs in the past 2 years, each one inspired by what Finn did for Emma. That's 12 more Finns out there, helping scared kids find their voices." 13, Sarah corrected, pointing to Hero. "Emma's been training him. She wants him to be a therapy dog too, to visit hospitals and schools. She says every kid who's scared deserves a hero." Officer Martinez smiled. "Like mother, like daughter, you're both pretty heroic yourselves." Sarah shook her head. "We just survived. Finn was the hero." "No," Martinez said firmly. "You all were. Emma for speaking when it was terrifying. You for having the courage to let her. Finn for being exactly who he is. Judge for believing this could work. It took all of you to create this miracle." As the sun set over Brooklyn, casting golden light across the courthouse steps, Emma ran back to her mother, Hero bounding beside her and Finn following at a more dignified pace. She crashed into Sarah's legs, breathless and beaming. "Mommy, did you know that when I grow up, I'm going to train dogs to help scared kids? Just like Officer Martinez. And Hero is going to be the best therapy dog ever, and we're going to help hundreds and hundreds of kids." Sarah knelt down, pulling her daughter close. "You already have, baby, you already have." That night, tucked into bed with Hero curled at her feet and Mr. Hoppy under her arm, Emma asked her mother to tell her the story. The story of the scared little girl and the good dog who saved her. "Once upon a time," Sarah began, her voice soft in the darkness, "there was a brave little girl who lost her voice." "But she found it again," Emma interrupted, completing the familiar refrain, "because a good dog showed her it was safe to speak." "That's right, baby." "Mommy, do you think Finn knows he's a hero?" Sarah thought about the gentle golden retriever, about his infinite patience and unconditional love, about the 43 children whose lives he'd changed. "I think Finn knows he helped, and I think that's all he ever wanted to do." Emma smiled in the darkness. "Good dog," she whispered, echoing the words that had changed everything. "Such a good dog." And somewhere across Brooklyn, Finn slept peacefully in Officer Martinez's home, dreaming whatever dreams good dogs dream, having lived a life of perfect purpose, bringing light to darkness, courage to the fearful, and voices to the voiceless. One small girl at a time. The end.